So how do you become a CFI or Certificated Flight Instructor for light sport aircraft? How do you pass the written, oral, and practical exam part? How do you study? How do you put it all together? Well, that's what I want to talk about today. The first thing you need to do is pass the FOI, or the Fundamentals of Instructing. So the best resource I've found to study for the FOI written test is the study guide produced by Gleim Aviation. It has two sections to it. The first section has questions and answers. And then the second section contains just about the entire aviation instructor's handbook. So it's a great value because you have two resources in one. Next, you're going to need to pass the flight instructor written exam. Another good resource to use in studying for the flight instructor written test is yet again the book produced by Gleim Aviation. It's entitled Flight/Ground Instructor. This book not only helps you prepare for the regular CFI, but it also helps you become a light sport flight instructor. And the way it does that is there is a guide in the back of the book. Appendix B, Sport Pilot Instructor Airplane. It tells you the steps to become a sport pilot instructor in airplane. And if you flip the page, it tells you everything to study and what not to study from this book. Basically, it tells you everything that's not pertinent, the things that you can leave out. Now, after you've passed the FOI and the flight instructor written exam, you're going to need to pick up a copy of the PTS, the Practical Test Standards, which includes all the standards for flight instructor. Now, if you're studying for something other than light sport, it's the ACS, or the Airman Certification Standards for flight instructor. So here's a copy of the Sport Pilot Practical Test Standards for weight shift control, powered parachute, and flight instructor in each of these categories. Now, when you look in the PTS, the first area of emphasis is called Fundamentals of Instructing. So you're going to need to pick up a copy of the Aviation Instructor's Handbook in order to study for this. So here's what the Aviation Instructor's Handbook looks like. This is the most recent edition, which is FAA H 8083-9B. Now, what I would recommend is taking each of the sections listed under Fundamentals of Instructing in the PTS and making tabs and tabbing your Aviation Instructor's Handbook. You can see the tabs that I put here on the side. Now, you're going to be required to have an instructional knowledge of each of the chapters. So the best way to do that is go through the book and make teaching note cards. Now, you're going to see right here some cards sticking out of the top of each chapter. And I have made a set of note cards. You got to realize that this is an open book test. So you can actually stand in front of a mock classroom with the examiner being a mock student, and you can take these notes out. You can teach these concepts, and you can even draw illustrations on a whiteboard. Under the Fundamentals of Instructing, there's one task that you need to be aware of, and that is planning instructional activity. And you're going to be expected to demonstrate how to write a syllabus and lesson plans. In fact, you're going to need to have a binder where you have written your own lesson plans. So here's my binder for ground training syllabus and lesson plans. And I'm going to open this up and we're going to look through it in detail. So I began with an example of what an 8-week ground school would look like. I have laid out a basic syllabus for that. It's 2 pages, front and back. Next, we come to a full ground training syllabus, which is broken into study units. First up is Study Unit 1, Airplanes and Aerodynamics, Part 1, and all the subheadings and subtopics. There's also Airplanes and Aerodynamics, Part 2. Then we move into Study Unit 2, Airplane Instruments, Engines, and Systems Part 1 with all the subheadings. And it goes on and on and on. I thought I should back up to the first page here and make a note that this is for ground training only. It's a ground training syllabus. You will also need a flight syllabus as well. Now, many flight schools will have you develop a complete syllabus and a complete set of lesson plans, both ground and flight. There are some examiners who like to see that you developed your own set, and there are other examiners who just want to make sure that you have these items in hand. You can purchase or you can buy a pre-made set by another instructor, and as long as you have them on hand, the examiner is satisfied. Now, I only made a syllabus for ground training, so what I did was I went out and I bought a set that included flight training, and this is Sport Pilot Powered Parachute Training Syllabus by Paul Hamilton. So this is an example of my ground training syllabus, and over here I have a set of ground training lesson plans. And in the lesson plans there's a section for attention, motivation, lesson objectives, content, and if you could see the back side of the page, it has equipment and completion standards. Not only did I make my own syllabus and lesson plans, but I've included examples from the Aviation Instructor's Handbook, the older version of that handbook, that is. So here's an example of a ground lesson for a syllabus. And I have an example of a flight lesson for the syllabus. And then I have lesson plan examples. Once again, from the Aviation Instructor's Handbook, there is a lesson plan example for ground and a lesson plan example for flight. Under part number 2, which is technical subject areas, you're going to need to be aware of the logbook entries and certificate endorsements. And for this, you're going to need to build another binder. Okay, back to the PTS. Under technical subject areas is a task, Task D, called logbook entries and certificate endorsements. So here's what my binder looks like for that. I have certificates, endorsements, and logbooks. You can see that on the bottom heading, but the top title or heading is MedExpress/IACRA instructions. One thing you're going to need to know is how to manage MedExpress and IACRA. These are online application processes for medical certificate and for student pilot certificate. And you're going to need to be able to explain these to your student. You're also going to need to be able to access IACRA. And so what I did was I made some basic instructions that I can hand off to a student. So I've printed out a portion of the IACRA user guide. I didn't print out the entire manual because it's extremely long. The portion I printed out was what would help me understand how to use the student pilot's FTN number to access their 8710-11 in order to process the form for their student pilot certificate. Now here's a document I found on the internet. It's not a specific AC or advisory circular, yet it goes step by step detailing what endorsements someone needs when they're working their way through the process of becoming a sport pilot, all the way from getting their student pilot certificate to their solo endorsements and so forth. Now, the most helpful document for understanding certificate endorsements is AC 61-65 version H. You can access this on the internet. I printed out the entire document. But if you work your way through it, it gives specific examples of what endorsements should look like. For example, beginning here with student pilot endorsements, it has the pre-solo aeronautical knowledge exam endorsement. Next up is the pre-solo flight training, and so on and so forth. Now under part or section number 3, which is a pre-flight lesson on a maneuver to be performed, it would be a really good idea to make some maneuver sheets that can be attached to your knee board during flight. So here's what I mean by maneuver sheets. As you can see, each one has an image of the maneuver to be performed. And then I have taken the steps for each maneuver and I've made them concise so that they'll fit on one sheet of paper. These can be put into your knee board or clipboard during flight. Now going through the process of breaking these down and summarizing them will help you to learn the maneuvers. You will be able to take these, stand before a mock student, and teach them and draw them out on a whiteboard if need be. You're also going to be able to use these during the actual flight portion of the practical exam. Now moving ahead in the PTS to areas of operation, the first thing encountered is pre-flight preparation. And for this, in order to be able to demonstrate a teaching knowledge of each of these tasks, it would be a really good idea to build a set of teaching notes, which is, yet again, a binder. So here's the area of operation called pre-flight preparation with all of the different tasks. So if you'll make a binder like this one, if you should be asked any questions on those different areas of operation, you'll be able to answer them. In fact, you'll be able to teach them, and you have to have a teaching knowledge. So as you can see here, there's study unit 1, airplanes and aerodynamics, and this goes right along with the syllabus and lesson plans that I developed. And once you get past the introductory material, you can see some of the actual teaching notes, and these were developed on PowerPoint, but I also printed them out so that I can place them into a binder and have them as a ready resource at any time without having to pull them up on the computer. Now for all other areas of operation, you need to pick up a copy of the Powered Parachute Flying Handbook. So here's the Powered Parachute Flying Handbook. Now I want you to notice something in the PTS. Under the areas of operation, such as number 1, pre-flight preparation, task J and K, they are in bold print. So what I've done is every item that is in bold print, I have looked it up in the Powered Parachute Flying Handbook, and I've made tabs. You can see the tabs right here on the side of the book. Now, in order to fill in any missing information, I would encourage you to pick up a recent copy of the FAR-AIM. So here's a copy of the FAR-AIM, and I'm sure you've noticed I've also put tabs on it as well. Notice that each of these tabs have something to do with the operation of powered parachutes. And this is information you cannot find in the Powered Parachute Flying Handbook. And last but not least, you're going to need an oral exam guide. And the only one I was able to find in the industry was entitled Sport Pilot Checkride by Paul Hamilton. So here's what Paul Hamilton's book looks like, the Sport Pilot Checkride. This is absolutely the best resource I've found for light sport aircraft and preparing for your check ride for sport pilot or for sport pilot instructor. I highly recommend this book by Paul Hamilton. This book is an all-in-one resource for sport pilot instructors, and I just want to show you something really amazing, something that's really useful. Paul Hamilton gives us numerous examples of the Form 8710-11, and he shows us how to fill them out, how each of the boxes need to be checked, what you need to fill in some of the blanks. So passing the CFI check ride of any kind, including light sport, it seems like a big mystery. And I was able to put together all this material, all this information through over 4 years of research and talking to different instructors. So if you're curious if this study procedure actually works, well, I think it had something to do with me actually passing my CFI check ride. So if you would, let me know if this has been helpful to you by commenting in the comment section below or by giving this a big thumbs up. Well, that's all for now, so until next time.